It is Friday, November 15th, 1 month and 9 days since Suzanne Simpson was last seen alive. Her husband, Brad Simpson, remains locked up in the Bexar County Jail, charged with her murder. I'm Robert Price, coming to you live on YouTube right now from San Antonio, Texas. And joining me to discuss this case, three reporters who've been on all over this from the very beginning. Jordan Elder, Mariah Medina, and Yami Virgen, each is prepared to discuss a specific aspect of this investigation. Jordan, we will start with you. What have you been up to for the last several days since the arrest warrant affidavit for Brad Simpson was unsealed on Tuesday?
We've been looking deeper into the evidence because this affidavit is one of the first looks that we've gotten at what investigators are using to charge him with murder, and then also kind of where they've been looking and searching. So we have kind of been digging deeper into this as an investigative unit the last few days. So we want to take you through some of the things that they found in this affidavit, and then the things that we still have questions about, because a lot of this evidence, we've been able to run it past experts and talk to them about what they think this could lead to. So I want to start with the concrete. We know that it first shows up in the affidavit on October 7th at 9:53 a.m. We know that Brad goes to Home Depot. He dropped his daughter off at school, then he went to Whataburger, and then he went to Home Depot. So I did a little investigating. I went to Home Depot and I found that same brand of concrete that Brad is said to have bought in this affidavit. There are several types of it, as you'll see. The bags are different colors. So the affidavit doesn't get too specific on which type that he purchased. But in doing this research, I found out you can hand mix this concrete, especially if you have a bucket like this, which the affidavit said that Brad purchased. So the company's website says you need 3 quarts of water per bag if you're going to mix this concrete. And we know from the affidavit that Brad bought 2 gallons of water at a gas station. So that could cover both bags, but police found one of the concrete bags in his garage. So we're assuming maybe he only used one if he used it. As for when he may have used it and mixed it, we know that he had water and concrete after he went to that gas station, and then he's seen on surveillance video heading west into Bandera. He then veered toward Medina, Texas, which is in Bandera County, and stayed there for about 13 minutes before heading back toward Bernie. So if he got the fast drying type of this concrete, it sets in about 20 to 40 minutes. So we're still not sure what he did with it, but we took a little bit of a deeper dive into some of the possibilities, especially with this specific company's concrete.
All right. Well, we'll get back to you because you've obviously been discussing and looking into various aspects of this arrest warrant affidavit. I want to check in with Mariah really quick. As we mentioned off the top, Brad Simpson remains at the Bexar County Jail, charged with Suzanne's murder. His bond is set at $3 million. An illegal maneuver that was recently trotted out by the Brad Simpson defense team was a request for something called an examining trial. Mariah, what is an examining trial and what's their goal here?
So an examining trial, as it was explained to me by multiple criminal defense attorneys, essentially gives the state the opportunity to explain its case against Brad Simpson. Do they have enough probable cause to continue to hold him for the charge of murder? As we saw in the arrest affidavit, that was what the state had provided in terms of probable cause. Now, something that really stood out to me is that I could not find a defense attorney that had done an examining trial in state court in Bexar County.
Really?
And so criminal defense attorney John Hunter, who is not tied to this case, explained to me that effectively during the Susan Reed administration,
Former Bexar County District Attorney.
Former Bexar County District Attorney Susan Reed's administration, that they just did away with examining trials. Usually they would just quickly indict the individual for the charge. And in the state of Texas, we kind of have a safeguard, safety valve, if you will, where the state has 90 days to indict you. Otherwise, you are eligible for a PR bond. Where you're released on your own recognizance. So they have 90 days from the date of the arrest, from the date Brad Simpson was arrested, to indict him on that charge. And so what happens is usually it speeds up the clock to indictment. And John Hunter said that this is basically worst case scenario for a prosecutor to have an examining trial go through for it to actually reach an examining trial, because it would allow the defense to subpoena witnesses, to really get to talk to the investigators on the case and ask them, what do you have? What are your mental impressions of this case? And he says, usually for trial, you've gotten to woodshed, so to speak, your witnesses, but with an examining trial, you don't really have that. And so he was saying that it would be rare. He used a phrase that I have never heard. It's as rare as a hen has teeth.
Okay, sure.
that an examining trial will occur. But he did say that should one occur, there would be a really big testament to the Joe Gonzalez administration. He says that this is what effectively allows fair play and justice to occur for the state to really put on what it has.
Well, Yami, really quick, speaking of what do they have, Jordan will get into this a little more thoroughly in a moment, but you can speak to what we learned from the arrest warrant affidavit is investigators appear to have a mountain of evidence, not just physical evidence, but digital evidence, data extracted from cell phones, computers. How much are we talking here?
Well, and before we get to that, I do want to mention, because I'm sure people are aware that today we did find out that there's movement going on at the home of Suzanne and Brad Simpson.
On East Olmus Drive.
Correct. There are movers that are there today. There's been a lot of noise. We're able to speak with a neighbor nearby who said that they have carpenters out there. They have saws out there. Things are getting thrown out and packed up, which seemed a little quick to me. I did call some law enforcement agents that I do know, and they said, this was something very traumatic that happened. My sources close to the investigation tell us that they do have custody of the home, the children, so the brother and sister can do as they wish now with that home because the search warrants have been served.
Brad Simpson's brother.
Correct. So this is going on right now as we speak. Now back to the question that you had. For an example, the Uvalde shooter that killed the children and the teachers in Uvalde, I do have a copy of the entire cell phone that was downloaded. It's just over, I believe, a terabyte of information. And when you open it to look at it, it's not as easy as, this. Oh, here's the affidavit, ABC. It's not that easy. You literally have to dig through a ton of stuff, and some of it doesn't make sense. So you need experts to be able to look at that data and then bring it back to your timeline and to the evidence that you do have and see how it fits in.
I think an analogy I once saw to what a terabyte represents is like several volumes of the Encyclopedia Britannica all printed out. I mean, it's thousands of pages.
It's insane. And some of the stuff that you can't get, for example, and I know investigators normally don't like us talking about this because they believe that we're letting criminals know. But I think in the several cases that I've done, I think a lot of times the people that seem to get away with it for the longest already knew what they were going to do if they were in that situation. So Snapchat, things like Snapchat that disappear. The Jason Landry case, the college student that disappeared between San Marcos, Texas, going home to Houston. He was Snapchatting with someone. Those messages are gone. And there's no location for where he was at when that last text went through. So some of those apps that are out there will do this. There are some apps that are better. There's some apps that I myself as a journalist use because we believe that it's encrypted and your sources won't get in trouble. But is there a foolproof way? Unless it disappears, I'm told there's no foolproof way.
Well, as we make our way back around the horn, Mariah, in that arrest warrant affidavit, the FBI makes clear that there was a concerted effort on Brad Simpson's part to prevent that downloading of data through something called lockdown mode. What have you learned about lockdown mode?
Yeah, so I went down a rabbit hole. When it comes to lockdown mode, it's a fairly new feature for the iPhone. It was launched kind of in beta mode in 2022, but it's now a part of virtually every iPhone that is modern. And it really safeguards your phone against quote unquote sophisticated cyberware attacks. But there were a lot of people that I saw just on Reddit, on other social media channels that say that they use this lockdown mode for day-to-day use. So it prevents you from receiving certain types of attachments. It prevents you from receiving FaceTime calls unless I believe you have previously contacted an individual before. It also prevents certain apps from downloading data. And then something that I thought was very interesting is that it also makes it so that you have to type in a passcode in order for something to be plugged in and for those things to communicate with each other. And I know Jordan had spoken with an expert who had said that there might potentially even be troves of data on the vehicle. But something that I saw from my research is that whenever you plug something in, you have to type in the passcode, trust the device, and then and only then can it communicate that information. And it appears as if this particular setting has made it very difficult for companies like Cellbrite, which is used by law enforcement to image cell phones or download cell phones, to get into that cell phone, whereas they normally would be able to just by plugging in a USB.
So what about attempts to physically destroy the actual device? We learned from investigators that Brad Simpson allegedly gathered up his phones, 3 of them, and a laptop, and set them on fire. Jordan, what have you learned about the effectiveness of doing something like this?
So I have been able to talk to several digital forensic experts in the last few days. We talked about lockdown mode, and then we talked about these devices. We were going through the affidavit and have identified that they say that Brad Simpson burned 3 phones and a laptop, and then he had another phone on him when he was arrested. So I wanted to know from the investigators, how tough is it going to be to get information off of those burned phones? And essentially they said that it was, it just varies. It depends on where the phones were in the fire, how hot it was, how long they were in there. They said there's the most hope for the laptop because that's bigger. It's not going to burn as quickly. But even for the phones physically that were burned, investigators have said they have determined they belong to Brad Simpson. So that tells me maybe they've been able to glean a little bit from them. But even if you don't have full access to the physical phone, most of our phones back up to iCloud or some sort of cloud, or you've got a backup of your phone somewhere on a different device. So even if they can't get information off of the device itself, like if the motherboard is damaged or things like that, if they get a warrant and can search in that data, like Yami was mentioning, kind of the download of a phone, they could still see the information on there. But again, it raises the question of 4 phones for one person is a lot. What were they being used for? Why burn them? And then it's still kind of a question how much they were able to get off of these devices. And if you want to see those full interviews with the forensic experts, those are on this same YouTube page if you want to watch those interviews.
So I've decided we're going in snake formation on this
We're
question.
coming
So
back.
that means in snake formation, she gets the next question as
Oh.
well.
Yes.
It bounces back to her, and then
Yes.
we'll make our way
Before
back.
you go to your next question,
All
here's one. I do not use iCloud. I don't back up anything. And that was taught that a long time ago. Anybody subpoenas that, the sources that I have to protect them. If I back up something on that iCloud, it can get hacked into and people can get your information out. So that's another thought. Not everyone uses it. And to me, the amount of effort that he went through kind of tells me if they were having issues, totally speculating, but if you're having issues, you know that you may lose it someday. What would I do? That from all the actions, that makes me believe that he may have thought that this day may come. You know,
And correct me if I'm wrong, but you not only don't use iCloud, you also keep all your money and your paycheck under your mattress, correct? Or buried in the backyard? Is that
Robert,
right?
I don't.
Okay.
I don't. But no, seriously,
Yeah.
I don't. I also, when I take notes, I don't write any names, and I don't take any notes that anybody else would really understand other than myself. But that's me as a reporter, you know, knowing that I have to protect other people who are my sources.
And it's educational to let people know out there who think maybe they're off the grid, but they truly aren't.
You're
Not
never
fully.
truly off the grid.
And I talked to the experts about that too. And we were talking about the vehicle location data and devices and how much your car talks to your phone. And I asked, can you ever truly be off the grid? And they said increasingly in our world, it's hard because even if you don't have a phone on you, you have a really, really old car that's not pinging anywhere or doing GPS. You drive past a Tesla and there's record of you because they have cameras. You drive past a business or a home with a Ring camera, there's record of you. Unless you're somewhere so completely rural with none of this stuff, it's very, very difficult to truly be off the grid.
So, Jordan, bouncing off of that, something that I've also seen very recently, this phenomenon where police in Detroit, Michigan, I believe it was, were reporting that phones were just rebooting themselves. And something that iPhone has come out with in recent iterations of their operating system is this self reboot. If you are not accessing your phone, I think it's like for 72 hours, it will reboot. And this happened to phones in Faraday bags. They sent out a notice or a memo to all law enforcement agencies in the region up in Detroit, just warning them like, hey, this is happening. And so Apple has confirmed that they have implemented this new software update to safeguard that data, in addition to encrypting the iCloud data so that they don't even have the ability to comply with the subpoena.
But even at that, I mean, there's something, and I just learned about this. I was talking to a friend who works in DC law enforcement, and they're starting to use quantum, what is it called? Quantum encryption, because of the fear always now of the Chinese being able to get into the phone. So you have so many different levels, you know, of encryption. My big question was also, maybe when you talk to the experts, either one of you, geofencing. You got to figure that at some point geofencing will happen here, and we've talked about it in other cases. And geofencing is basically we're next to each other, so there's going to be a record of who was around. They can get that information, so they could tell that Yami was sitting next to or in the area vicinity of Mariah, Robert, Jordan, Marisa behind us, and that we were in the vicinity of each other. So you got to wonder if that geofencing information came in, and if her cell phone, which I'm told has yet to be found, was shut off, that geofencing would not occur with her phone. So if somebody else came in to help him, you know what I mean? How are you going to work that? But you said, tell me about the cell phone. I know you were talking about Brad's cell phone specifically.
Yes. So the way that the affidavit reads is they were talking about how he was cycling it on and off and putting it in lockdown mode. They said, quote, in a manner rarely seen. So the experts have said lockdown mode is not something that your phone comes in a default. You have to actively seek that out and do it and implement it. And the experts that I talked to at least said it's not something that a lot of people just commonly know how to do. We know that they were able to get into at least one of his phones, the one that he had on him when they were arrested, because they were able to find the notes on his phone that were talking about times that he had assaulted his wife in 2023 and then the night of, I believe, October 6th. So they were able to at least get into that one. It's not clear if that was the one that had been kind of cycling location wise or if it was one of the burned ones, but they were able to get into at least one of them the way that this reads.
Jordan, let's talk about Brad Simpson's truck, a 2019 black GMC Sierra. And Jordan will be sticking to the facts. Viewer BP Wheatley, there will be no speculation here. What are we learning from the affidavit about the truck?
And Yami looked into this a little bit too, so I'll let you jump in. But essentially, the affidavit cites vehicle location data several times. And so when I was speaking with the experts, I had kind of asked, is it because the phone was connected to the car, or can you track the car itself? And they said it just kind of depends on the technology, if the GPS was updated, because sometimes your car takes cues from your phone when you're navigating and with your GPS, but then other times your car can collect certain data about the way that you drive and where you are, especially as cars get more and more technology friendly. They were talking about how cars nowadays can have like a hotspot in there, like with Wi-Fi. And that can be something that collects data about where you are. So they don't explicitly state how much vehicle location data they had or like how specifically they were getting it, but they are citing that in here. So we know that they have access to at least some of that from the truck.
And then you have the black box in the vehicles, and it also depends on the make model of the vehicle. The black box can tell, for example, in a crash, how fast you were going when you hit the brake. How far did you go, you know, so many miles an hour before you put a turn signal on. So all those things help. And on this vehicle, I think in the affidavit, it mentions OnStar, right?
I don't know.
I believe it says OnStar. I'll go back and look. But if you have OnStar, that's another thing. Now, my vehicle, it's a little bit older. It's a GMC. The OnStar doesn't all the time follow exactly where you're at. Your OnStar can go off from a minute to 3 hours sometimes, and you don't see where the vehicle's at. If you have, for me, I have, a child that drives the vehicle. I want to know where she's at, and also the year of the vehicle, because the data is now changing, the technology is changing. You may not be getting that information the entire time you're driving in that car. So we don't know what they have. And I know somebody was mentioning about speculating. This is what we do behind the scenes that you guys don't do, so that we can do our stories. We start digging, we look for information, and we try to figure out what has not gone out there. This case, of course, has a lot of public attention all over the United States. I was on a YouTube site the other day where I jumped in, and somebody recognized me as a reporter in San Antonio that has been working on the case the last few weeks. And people have the interest for the simple reason of, it's a mother that went missing. Most moms don't just walk away and leave their children behind. And there's evidence of fighting that was going on before, and the evidence of the neighbor. So that's part of the interest in this case as to what happened to Suzanne. So when you guys are seeing us talk about these things, we spend time, doing interviews, going down rabbit holes, and we have to bring ourselves back in so that we can ask the right questions also of law
Especially
enforcement.
since law enforcement made that leap themselves in charging Brad with her murder when they don't have a dead body.
Exactly. And that, I think, was the biggest thing. And I asked all of you, when's the last time do you remember, of this being done? I have several. I have 2 cases that come to mind where we never found Patty Bond 28 years later. But if you look at the DPS website, it says the husband is the person of interest. They never charged. Baby Gabriel, no body, missing 15 years, no charges of murder. And his mother was involved in that. So it does make you wonder, what do they have? What are they working on? And also when we come out and we speak and we do YouTube's live, it reminds people. So if you live in Medina County, in Bandera, in areas that come out in this affidavit, it may make you stop and go, you know what? Hey, weren't we driving by and we saw the truck like this, at the corner store, and we thought it was kind of odd? It'll jog somebody's memory. Somebody out there has to have that piece of the clue that's finally going to bring some justice to Suzanne and some peace to her children.
Not to put everyone on the spot, but do we know if active searches for her body are ongoing as we speak? I mean, is that what the impression would be? I mean, I don't know for a fact, but I didn't know if either of you guys.
During one of our live streams, somebody had said, are you going to publish a map so that we, the public, can assist in potentially locating her? We've gotten emails from individuals that have created their own timelines with maps and have said, you guys should look here, or based off of my calculations, there's a potential that she could be here. And so I know, if not law enforcement, we're actually getting
an Amber Alert, I think.
Some type of alert. But if not law enforcement, the public is definitely searching. I mean, even the day after, I believe, the warrant was unsealed, somebody had said, I am going down to Medina, or I am going down to Bandera and searching this particular area. If anybody wants to come with me, really, the law enforcement agency, the lead law enforcement agency, I think, is Olmos Park.
Correct.
And they have very limited resources, but I mean, obviously they have the Rangers as well.
Correct.
But I mean, only so many resources can go toward one particular case. So I'm sure the public was really assisting.
So we've been going live on YouTube for the past 25 minutes. Some of you may be joining us now, missed the first 10 minutes or so. So before we leave, I want to one more time reiterate this idea of the examining trial, the most tangible next step in this process, the murder trial of Brad Simpson. His defense team is requesting what is called an examining trial. Do you want to recap one more time what that means?
Yeah, so an examining trial basically is the defense's ask of the state to say, hey, what do you have on my client that allows you to keep him in jail on this particular charge? So the state will have to produce evidence that they have enough probable cause as to each element of the offense that they can keep Brad behind bars. So one of 2 things, well, there are a few things that could happen. A judge says there's no probable cause for this charge. He gets to walk free if for a short period of time and the charge is refiled later on. or the judge says there is enough probable cause for this charge, but the bond is too high. It's insufficient, so we're going to lower the bond. And so this vehicle for addressing the court goes away if the state does decide to indict him. They have 90 days to indict him on a felony offense. But John Hunter, a criminal defense attorney who is not tied to this case, explained to me that after that, they can still file a writ to have basically the same things considered, which is probable cause for the charge, as well as whether or not the bond is too high. And in his longtime business partner's case, a judge did find that the bond was excessively high. So who knows what could happen.
Math has never been my strong suit, but by my count, it's been 8 days since he was charged with murder. So that gives them about 22 more days to indict him, I would imagine.
Since he was charged with murder, 90 days.
90 days. So 90 days.
You did say
minus
math was
8,
not your strong suit.
So that would be, watch everyone, 82 days.
Yes.
82 days they have left. And also, as we mentioned, as Yami said, it's extremely rare for the DA's office to bring a murder charge with no body. It's also extremely rare for this examining trial to be requested. You said that many lawyers you spoke to have never even participated in one.
Correct. So I don't know how far rare it is that they're requested. I remember in the Delaney Chires case, which I believe has not gone to trial yet, but her attorney requested an examining trial, and I believe she was subsequently indicted shortly thereafter. But
to make that moot, to make it no longer,
Right. But his attorneys still have the opportunity to file a writ even after that.
Mm-hmm.
But
the other thing that I wanted to bring up before we went on air, I did make some calls, some of my sources, and asked them, we're going to be talking about this. What do you think of the affidavit? And they were very clear when they're writing those affidavits. Yes, granted, you're writing it so that it is signed by a judge, but you have to also remember this becomes public. So everything that you're looking at is in here. So they do keep some things to themselves until it's time to bring it out. They do the most that they need to be able to get that warrant. But we have got to, and I will assume here, they have more than what we know.
Is that the arrest warrant affidavit?
This is our murder affidavit.
Can you go to the last page, the very last page? It is the last thing.
Yes,
he says.
I know exactly what you're going to say.
He literally says that. He says I want to get the exact wording down, but
let's see.
The one where there's a little bit of text at the top and then space at the bottom.
Do you remember what?
As you can tell, we've looked at this a lot.
That it's not his complete understanding, that there's potentially more.
Here it is. Your affiant has reason to believe and does believe the said defendant, Brad Simpson, on or about the day of October 24th. Actually, it's before that.
October 6th.
Yeah. Hold on. I think that's the wrong part. Let me go back up.
The facts in this affidavit come
38.
from my personal observations, my training and experience, and information obtained from other officers. The affidavit is intended to show that there is sufficient probable cause for the requested warrant and does not set forth all my knowledge about this matter. So does not set forth.
Yeah.
So we'll learn more as time goes on,
Certainly.
I'm sure. And we will bring it to you when we get there. I also want to remind everybody before we go, we do have that interactive map up on our website where you can look at all of the locations the affidavit lays out. You can see kind of what that path looked like. And then we've got the timeline as well. So you can click through and see exactly when he was at all of these locations. If you do believe that maybe you were also in that area or have information, and we have that information on our website as well too, if you do need to reach out to the investigators on this case.
When we look at these, like when we finally get these, I know for me, the first thing that I'm doing, I'm looking at all the names. And there's a few names there that we had not talked about. Sunny, her best friend, Guadalupe, the housekeeper that was in the home. And, they usually know everything that happens in that house. Everything that happens with the children, with the couple. Those are the people that I think would have a little more information. The other people to me would be, of course, the children, the grown children who have been very vocal on social media. One of them, her daughter out in New York City who's studying, and that Instagram post that she put was chilling. To say that about your father, that tells me that in her heart of hearts, she truly believes that her father did something to her mother. So then my question as a reporter is, have they yet, or will they allow one of those children, because I understand a couple of them want to speak to their father and they have not had the opportunity to. So I wonder when and if they will allow them, because to me as a parent, to see my child questioning me and asking me what I did with their other parent, I think that to me would be the breaking point. That's when you have to come clean. And I understand at this point, you know, you're not guilty until found guilty in a court of law. But just the evidence, I keep going over this evidence, and the children, her post did the most for me. She knows her parents. She grew up in that home. In her heart, for her to open up in that way and say that about her father, it just tells me also that if she is able to speak to him, maybe he will come forward and say what happened. I mean, there's many things that could have happened. They could have been fighting and she fell down. They could have been fighting and he was defending himself. There's many things that could have happened, but we're not going to know until he shares it or they find the body. But it's been already over a month.
And we have been doing these YouTube live streams every 2 or 3 days, I would say.
Mm-hmm.
We'll probably be back here on Tuesday or Wednesday of next week. A good opportunity to bring everyone up to speed where things stand with the case and answer your questions. Until then, hopefully have more clarity over the weekend and on into next week. Until then, I'm Robert Price. For Jordan Elder, Mariah Medina, and Yami Virgen, thank you so much for joining us.